I'm 26, living in a one-bedroom with creaky floors over a donut shop, and every December I go home because our family does Christmas like it's a performance. It's always the same, a live tree dragging sap across the foyer like it's bleeding, my mom ironing the table runner nobody's allowed to spill on, my dad pretending the ancient coffee maker sputtering out is part of the charm. We know our lines. We hit our marks. We don't ad-lib. There are 3 of us, Jess 28, me, and Alex 23. Jess is the one who knows which side of the napkin the fork goes on and how to change a tire. She was born competent. Alex is the one all the neighbors say is so magnetic, which is a polite way of saying our dad's eyes stop scanning the room when they land on him. I'm the middle, which isn't a personality as much as a position. I'm good at smoothing over, laughing when the joke flatlines, collecting everyone's coffee mugs in the morning because you were up anyway. The house smells like cinnamon and old carpet. It's in the Midwest, in one of those neighborhoods where every cul-de-sac has its own HOA Facebook drama and a hand-painted sign warning about deer. If you stand on the front porch and listen, you can hear the flag on the neighbor's pole click against the metal when the wind hits it just right. That sound is in the background of every argument I can remember. There's always been a weird current in our family. It's hard to explain without sounding like I'm reading subtext into every gesture, but it's like, imagine a painting where a small part of the frame doesn't fit, and the artist painted over the gap, and if you stare long enough you can see the seam. Growing up, there were these awkward silences that weren't attached to anything obvious, these sudden extra kindnesses that felt like someone trying to cover a bruise with concealer. When I was 8, I asked why there were no baby pictures of Alex on the mantel, and my mom said, "We were just distracted that year." Then changed the subject to whether I wanted marshmallows in my cocoa. Jess and I used to joke that our parents divided love up like a pie and miscounted the slices. Dad gave Alex seconds and thirds, then licked the plate. Mom cut slivers for Jess with military precision and handed me whatever crumbs were stuck to the knife. That sounds bitter. I don't mean it that way. It's just how it felt. We all played our parts in it. If Dad forgot my school play, I acted like the lighting was too harsh for him to see me, anyway. If Mom bought Jess a thoughtful book and handed me a bath set from the drugstore, I made a joke about smelling like lilacs and moved on. If Alex forgot chores, a warm hand would land on their shoulder. I'll do it. The first Christmas after I moved out, I went home and found Alex's old soccer trophies boxed up in the hall, and when I started to carry them to the basement, Dad took them from me. "I've got that," he said, the way he always does around Alex's things, and his voice did a soft thing I've never heard it do for anyone else. Not even Mom. Certainly not me. This year, the year with a gift, I drove home the night of the 22nd. The highways were all salt and hazard lights, and by the time I pulled into our driveway, my wipers had carved tunnels in snow that kept deciding to be rain instead. The bay windows spilled yellow light onto the lawn like we were in a Hallmark movie. Inside, the tree wore all the same ornaments: the clothespin reindeer from Jess's kindergarten, the ceramic star with my name that has a chip in the bottom point, the glossy blue ball Alex made in high school ceramics with a finger smudged. Mom hugged me in that way that feels like getting measured for a coat. "You cut your hair," she said, as if it were an accusation. "It suits you. Come in, don't let the heat out." Dad came from the kitchen with a beer tucked into his elbow, chin stubble patched like frost. "There's my kid," he said. Like he was surprised I'd shown up. Like I didn't every year. Alex was in the living room, legs folded under them, wrapping a scarf around the cat and narrating what the cat would say if she were human. Alex's laugh has this bubble in it, like it's letting you in on something. "Look who it is," Alex said, already opening their arms. "You brought the city grime." They smelled like oranges. They always do, like they're living in a different season. We settled into our positions. Jess came the next day with her fiancé, who wears wool socks like an old man and is allergic to cilantro. Mom handed out lists, groceries, candles to replace, which relatives to call, who was in charge of the fun appetizer. Dad made a big show of rearranging the living room. For optimal wrapping paper flow. Alex sat with him, legs swinging, and they had this quiet conversation in the corner about a package that had been delayed, but no worries. That was the first seam I saw this year and tried not to trace with my eyes. When I say there's a script, I mean even the fights show up where you expect them. Someone will say something about work like, "It's fine, just fine." And someone else will hear, "I'm failing," and offer advice that's a sharp thing wrapped in kindness. Then Mom will oversalt something and turn quiet as a thermostat. Then Dad will soften in Alex's direction like a flower bending toward the light. These are the beats. You either dance or you sit out and watch everyone pretend they're not tripping over each other. I hadn't planned to talk about who I am beyond that. I don't think I'm interesting. I make coffee for people who say, "Golly," without irony and tip and change. I listen to podcasts about scams. I jog when it's too cold to jog, and it makes me feel like I've beaten something. What I am in my family is an observer with a good memory and a bad habit of minimizing. I didn't know how much that habit was going to cost me, or how quickly the set would splinter under our feet once the bow got untied on a box that wasn't a box at all. The group chat leading up to Christmas was chaos, mostly because Jess insists on sending photos of her dog in sweaters and my dad uses voice to text like a man recording a ransom demand. Mom sent a spreadsheet, color-coded, naturally, of menu prep timing. She added a cheerful, "Let's keep it simple this year," which is something she says every year before producing a turkey, ham, prime rib, and a vegan lentil loaf because Aunt Paige went plant-based in 2016 and we've never been allowed to forget it. Dad texted me separately, "What's Alex into this year? Any big wants?" It was odd. He doesn't usually shop early, and he certainly doesn't ask me. He has a mental inventory of Alex's desires the way I have one for my own grocery list: cereal, dish soap, bananas. I told him the truth. Alex had mentioned noise-canceling headphones, a new coat. Something practical, honestly. Dad sent back a thumbs up and then, 5 minutes later, "Do you think they'd want a little more than that?" I stared at that little more, like it was a crack in the sidewalk I'd trip over later. I typed, "Sure," and left it alone. The 23rd was charcuterie and chaos. I sliced salami while Alex arranged grapes like jewels on a platter, and Dad uncorked 2 bottles of wine like he'd been practicing. Jess arrived with Mason, fiancé, and stood in the foyer saying hi in that bright voice that means she's already annoyed about something, probably the temperature. "Do we live in a barn?" she asked, throwing her coat onto the banister. Mom said, "It's festive. Meaning drafty, meaning turn up the thermostat, Dan, but don't say I told you to." We did the annual ornament thing where we each buy one new and hang it, announce what it represents. Jess held up a tiny whisk. "Planning a wedding when your mom thinks glue guns are a personality trait." Mom smiled too big. Dad raised an eyebrow. Alex held up a silver star. "For figuring out that I like my own company," they said, and for a second I wanted to ask what that meant, because Alex isn't alone very often. They're one of those people whose friends spill out the door and down the walk. But something in the way Dad looked at them, soft, brimming with that private humor the two of them share, made me swallow the question. Little things stacked up. Dad took Alex to the garage to check something, and 15 minutes later they both came back smelling like cold air and secrets. Mom handed Jess an heirloom cutting board and told her not to put it in the dishwasher in a tone that suggested Jess would run it over with a truck if not told otherwise. She handed me a candle and said, "You like woodsy smells." Which I do, but it felt like she'd picked it because it was safe. The cat nested under the tree skirt and blinked at all of us as if we were overcomplicating feline simplicity. On Christmas Eve, we did church. The same pew, the same carols. "O Holy Night" is Jess's favorite, and she always sings that one harmony that makes the hairs rise on your arms. Alex, who doesn't sing because they hate their singing voice, hummed along, leaning their shoulder into Dad's, and he looked like a man who has something to be grateful for while pretending his life is exactly how he planned it. Mom's mouth moved around the words like they were pills she'd learned to swallow without water. Back home, hot chocolate, pajamas, the book we read as tradition. I read it one year and messed up the voices and everyone laughed, and I pretended not to care while caring a lot. This year Dad read, because Alex likes when he does the voices, and he did, all those goofy little cadences he only has when performing for an audience he cares about. When he got to the line about keeping Christmas in our hearts, he glanced up, horizon scanning. The tree lights reflected in his glasses in a way that made him look like he had stars in his eyes. We put out cookies for Santa, even though the youngest of us drinks whiskey and knows how to file taxes. Mom arranged them like a magazine shoot. "It's for the photo," she said when Jess rolled her eyes. Alex added an orange slice, grinning. "Santa's got to get his vitamin C." Dad laughed too hard, the way he does when Alex says anything remotely clever. I slept in my old room with the blue ceiling, the paint I convinced my parents to let me do when I was 13 because I wanted to pretend I was sleeping under the ocean. The posters are gone, the bookshelf tidied into something that suggests I had always been neat. In the quiet, I listened to the house creak, to the wind pick at the eaves, to someone, Dad, moving around downstairs after midnight. I thought about the texts about that. Little more. I thought about the way Mom's smile had a next-day headache hiding in it. I thought about how Alex had drifted into Dad's orbit all night, and how when Jess told a story about a work conflict, Mom's face had softened like she wanted to say something and didn't. There's that moment before sleep when thoughts don't feel like thoughts. They're more like weather moving through your head. A picture floated past, a huge red bow. The feeling underneath it was something like dread masquerading as anticipation. I told myself not to be dramatic. It's Christmas, I thought. We do Christmas. We know how. Morning. Cinnamon rolls that came out too dark on the edges and perfect in the center. Coffee in the mismatched mugs we've had since I was a kid, one with the handle glued back on, one with a chip that hits your lip just wrong. We take our places, Mom on the end of the couch where she can take photos without standing, Dad in the armchair by the lamp, Jess cross-legged on the floor with a trash bag for paper, Alex perched on the ottoman like a cat who knows this is a throne. Stockings first. Candy, $5 gift cards, a tiny screwdriver set for Mason that he pretended to be thrilled about because he's good like that. Alex pulled out the orange from theirs and bit into it like a son. Dad watched, smiling. Presents next, in order of age because Mom believes in systems. Jess went first, unwrapped a messenger bag she'd mentioned in passing 3 months ago. She looked at Mom like the board game of their relationship had shifted one square toward warm. Mom looked like she'd been waiting for that look. My turn, a sweater, exactly my style, and a book about con artists Jess definitely picked because she listens when I talk about my podcasts. I said thank you and meant it. Alex unwrapped a coat, practical, sleek. They hugged Mom, surprised. Mom tolerated it like a cat tolerates a toddler. There were the usual little things. Socks, the kind Dad buys in bulk because he doesn't like thinking about socks. A candle, mine, woodsy of course. A kitchen timer shaped like a chicken because Jess thinks she's hilarious. Laughter. The edges of the room relaxing. Then Dad stood, cleared his throat, and did something theatrical, clapped his hands twice, like he was calling actors to places. One more, he said. Alex? He disappeared into the hall and came back dragging something that wasn't actually that big but felt big because it was wrapped in ridiculous foil paper and had about the size of the cat's entire body. I felt the temperature in the room shift. Mom's smile froze at its edges. Jess stopped rustling paper mid-movement and shot me a quick glance that said, "You seeing this?" Alex said, "Oh my God, Dad!" laughing, but the kind of laugh you do when you're embarrassed and thrilled at the same time. He said it in front of Alex and sat on the ottoman arm like he couldn't bear even the inches between them. "Go on," he said. "Open it." The foil peeled loud. Under it, a plain cardboard box. Inside the box, tissue. Under the tissue, a small white envelope with Alex's name. Alex looked up, cheeks pink. "Dad," they said again, softer now. "Go ahead," Dad said too fast. Alex slid a finger under the flap. Pulled out keys. Shiny, heavy, rattling. There was a little leather fob, The kind a dealership gives you. Also a piece of paper folded in thirds. Alex's hands shook a little. What is this? Dad couldn't stay seated. He stood, then sat again, then stood. Go look, he said, grinning in a way that made him look younger and more foolish than I'd ever seen him. Out front. We all went, because of course we did. The air slapped our faces. In the driveway, a car. Not brand new, but new enough to be obscene. A hatchback, dark blue, with a stupidly big red bow on the hood like we'd wandered into a commercial. I heard Jess inhale this little sound that wasn't a sound so much as a choice to make a sound later. Mason put a hand on her arm. Mom didn't come outside, she stood in the doorway like a border guard. Alex covered their mouth with their hands. No, they said. No, no, no. Then to Dad. You didn't. Dad put an arm around Alex's shoulders and squeezed. You've been taking the bus in the snow, he said, as if this explained the sun. It's paid off. Insurance for the year. Merry Christmas. A neighbor waved. I wanted to wave them into our mess like a witness. I wanted to go back inside to the cinnamon rolls that weren't pretending to be anything other than burned on the edges. I wanted to not be the person who felt selfish when the gift wasn't for me, because it wasn't about me. But the unfairness of it was a physical thing, like a bruise I'd rolled over onto. I thought about my last car, the one that died on the highway, and how I'd begged Dad to co-sign a loan for a used Civic, and he'd said, "You'll feel better if you do it yourself." I had. I did. And also, I stood in the cold, keys to nothing in my empty hands, watching my dad beam at my sibling like he'd hung the moon. Back inside, Alex's eyes were shiny. They hugged Dad, hard, and then hugged Mom, who stiffened and then patted their back like a colleague. It's generous, Mom said in a voice that could frost glass. Jess handed me her empty coffee mug without looking at me, and I took it without looking at her. We went through the motions for the rest of the wrapping. The room felt smaller, full of paper and air we'd used up. Jess got a stand mixer she'd registered for. Mom's mouth did that thing again where she smiled like her teeth were cold. I unwrapped another sweater and felt absurd for caring whether the button-down I'd admired in October would manifest. It did not. Alex kept looking at the envelope like it might vanish if they didn't keep checking. Dad couldn't stop touching Alex's shoulder, their hair, the space near them. I wanted to do this, he said more than once, to no one, to everyone. You deserve it. That word did something to my chest. Deserve. Not. I want it. Not. I could finally afford. Not even. You've had a rough year. Which would have been true in the way any year for a 23-year-old is rough. Deserve. Like the cosmic ledger finally balanced, and he was relieved to have written the final number. Mom started stacking plates aggressively. Yoga at 4, she announced, like anyone was going to argue. Jess helped her, which is what Jess does when Mom gets brittle, one on either side of the mess, carrying it out with practiced hands. I stood in the living room with bits of tape stuck to my socks, looking at the bow that had slid off the box and crumpled like a dead flower. Alex tried the car horn from inside the house, and we all jumped, then laughed, then didn't. The thing about silence in a family like mine is that it's never empty. It buzzes. It says things we've all agreed not to hear. The gift sat between us that afternoon like an extra person everyone pretended to be comfortable with. Alex kept saying, "I can't believe it." And Dad kept saying, "Believe it." And the rest of us kept saying nothing at all. The 26th is always leftovers and board games and trips to Target because somehow we never have enough napkins. It's also when the holiday high comes down, and everyone remembers their regular resentments. Jess cornered me in the laundry room in the basement where the light buzzes and the concrete smells like summer water. She held up a towel like a flag and said too casually, "So, the car." I folded a sheet like it had answers inside it. "Yeah." She let the towel fall. "Do you remember when my car died last year?" She didn't wait. "He told me it would be character building to take the bus." For 6 months. Maybe he felt bad about. I started, because reflexively I defend him, and she raised an eyebrow so sharp it could cut string. About what? Jess said. About enabling? About turning Alex into a person who forgets to pay parking tickets because Dad will handle it? Or about something else? I looked at the washer like it might offer solidarity. He asked me what Alex wanted this year. I heard myself say, like I was tattling, like we were 10 again. Jess laughed short. Of course he did. She leaned against the dryer, and the vent rattled. Do you ever think about how there are no baby pictures of Alex in the living room? They're in the albums. I said automatically and then stopped. Because they aren't. Not really. There are a few from kindergarten forward. Alex with teeth too big for their face, Alex with a soccer ball, Alex coming home from camp in a tie-dye shirt. There's one of Jess holding a toddler, but when I picture it, the hair is wrong. The clothes are wrong for our kitchen at that time. The magnet on the fridge in the background is from a state none of us had visited yet. Jess was watching me think it through. Mom used to say we were distracted that year. She said soft and mean at the same time, which is Jess's native tongue. By what? We made tea we didn't want and pretended to have a conversation that wasn't about the thing it was obviously about. Upstairs, Dad and Alex were in the garage again. I went to get a screwdriver for Mason and caught the end of a sentence. Wanted to do right by you. Then the scrape of the garage door, both of them emerging into light like they'd been swimming in a lake we weren't invited to. That afternoon, Aunt Paige came by with her dog that barks at nothing. She brought a pie even though Mom had 3 of her own cooling like they needed friends. Paige hugged Alex too long. When she pulled back, there was something in her face that wasn't exactly pity and wasn't exactly envy. She did not look at Mom. Mom offered coffee like a question she hoped we'd all answer no to. After Paige left, Jess and I went to get napkins and sat in the Target parking lot for 13 minutes saying nothing. Jess finally said, I found something once. She said it like she'd been waiting to. What? My mouth went dry. A letter, she said. In Dad's desk, ages ago, when I was looking for a stamp because who even keeps stamps anymore? It was from a lawyer. It said something about guardianship. It had a name on it that wasn't Mom's. She looked at me, then out at the families hauling plastic bins to their cars. I put it back. Her voice had so what here's my gunpowder in it. My head did that tinnitus ring thing. What name? I asked. She blew out a breath. Elena. Or Ellen? Something with an E. I told myself it was nothing. You know how you do that. I do. I did. We bought napkins and pretended to care about patterns. Outside, snow dredged up from the plows banked around the edges of the lot like broken teeth. Back at the house, I went to the basement, not even sure what I was doing until I was doing it. There are shelves down there with paint cans and camping gear and that one box labeled taxes 2003 to 2007. I opened the one that said photos because that's where families keep their proof and their lies. A lot of it was nothing, doubles of blurry 4th of July fireworks, a program from my piano recital where I played Green Sleeves, Too Slow. And then, under a stack of construction paper placemats, a manila envelope with insurance written on it in my mom's neat, teacher handwriting. Inside, nothing about insurance. A photocopy of a birth certificate. A hospital bracelet, brittle rubber gone yellow at the edges. A notarized letter. The bracelet had a name written in Sharpe, all caps. Alexander. The last name wasn't ours. I sat on the cold floor and said oh, to no one. My breath made a little cloud in front of me. The certificate had a mother's name that wasn't Mara. The notarized letter had my dad's signature, shaky in a way I've only seen when he's nervous. It referenced assumption of guardianship and consent to placement. Placement. Like a couch. Like a package. Like a person. Footsteps on the stairs. I scrambled, stuffed everything back, wiped my fingerprints off objects you don't need to wipe your prints from unless you've done something wrong. It was Mom. She stopped halfway down and watched me with that tight mouth. What are you doing? Looking for extra lights. I lied. For the tree. There aren't any, she said, coming down the last steps. She stood too close like she always does when she's mad and pretending not to be. The tree doesn't need more. We looked at each other like we were the only two people in a courtroom. She was holding a basket with towels in it, like she'd come down to do laundry and not to find me. I could hear the TV from upstairs, the laugh track, the swell of canned emotion. Mom, I said, because I am not brave but I am sometimes unable to stop myself when the floor shifts under me. Did Dad adopt Alex? Is that? Her face changed in a way I'll see when I'm 80. She held the basket tighter. Go upstairs, she said. We have company. Do we? I said, and it sounded cruel. I didn't mean it to. Do we have company or do we just have each other? Mom set the basket down on the step like she was placing a bomb somewhere safe. We did what we had to do, she said, very soft. Go upstairs. I went. She stayed. I could feel the house straining to stay upright over our heads. I didn't sleep much that night. The house made its animal sounds and I lay there inventorying the bracelet, the letter, the way Mom said. We, the way Dad said, deserve. I tried to imagine the woman whose name was on the certificate. Elena. Ellen. The letters swam. I tried to map Alex's face for clues like a detective in a show, eyes like Dad's, maybe, mouth like nobody's. Who does Alex's nose belong to? Who does mine? In the morning, I found Mom in the pantry wiping down shelves that weren't dirty. The fluorescent light made everything look like a medical scene. We need more flour, she said when I opened the door because she's always narrating the world into manageable lists. Mom, I said. Please. She closed her eyes like I'd turned off a light in her head. Your father should tell you, she said. So it's true. She opened her eyes and met mine. I didn't say what it is. Her voice wasn't brittle now. It was something else. Tired. But yes. There is a thing. You're not crazy. Congratulations. She reached for a can of tomatoes and set it down again. I told him for years, that secrets rot the boards under your feet. He said he could keep the load-bearing ones to himself. Men. She stepped out of the pantry, and we stood in the doorway like people do in a house because thresholds are where everything happens. Mom, I said, and the word felt little and huge. Who is Alex? She flinched. That's not how you asked the question, I heard in my own head, and I hated how I always want to be polite even when the ground is opening. She looked past me toward the dining room, where the table was set for brunch as if an army were coming. She lowered her voice, not because anyone was nearby, but because that's what you do with words you never planned to say out loud. Your father had an affair, she said, each syllable like a color she'd scraped off an old wall. It was a long time ago. Before Alex. And then Alex's mother, there were circumstances. What circumstances? I said, and the fact that I could focus on grammar annoyed me even as I said it. She couldn't keep them. Mom said, which is not the same thing as couldn't love them, and not the same thing as had to give them up, and not even the same thing as died. I felt the shape of a story but not its lines. Mom, I said. I think I was whispering. Are you saying Alex is Dad's? She closed her eyes again and this time a tear slid out, which I don't remember seeing since my grandfather's funeral. Yes, she said. He brought his child into my house and said it would be the making of us. I believed him. I wanted to be the person who could do that. Who could love big. She looked at me like she wanted me to be the kind of child who would absolve her. I did love them, she said quickly, a defensive thought spilling out. I still do. And also I never. She stopped. I never stopped knowing what they were to him. I felt cold in a place that wasn't my skin. Does Alex know? I don't know what Alex knows. The honesty of it hit me. Mom doesn't say, I don't know. She says things that sound like knowing. We didn't tell you because. She laughed without humor. Because of this. Because of your faces right now. I didn't realize Jess had come into the doorway until she said, Did you honestly think this would go better if we were 30? Mom flinched like Jess had slapped her, Your father should tell you. Mom said again, like a spell. I told him to. I told him a car wouldn't. She pressed her lips together, wiped at her cheek like she was erasing her own expression. Please don't drag a scene through my dining room, she said, and there she was, the woman who cares about runners and centerpieces. Not with the good plates out. Jess stepped aside like a matador and let Mom pass. I leaned into the pantry shelf and laughed a high, wrong laugh. A car, I said, because sometimes you say the word like it's the whole story. Jess's mouth was a thin line. I always thought I knew what kind of cliché our father would be, she said. Turns out it's the original. We found Dad in the garage again. Of course we did. He was tinkering with nothing, measuring the same board twice. Alex was walking the perimeter, running their fingers along the seams of the new car's seats like they were reading Braille. Dad looked up when he saw us and his face did a series of things. Open, close, bright, dim. What's up? He said in the tone people use when they've unzipped something and can't get it back up. Can we talk? Jess asked, and she said it like a judge. Alex sensed it, the way animals do. I'll get coffee, they said too quickly, but Dad said, stay, and the word hung there. Jess didn't perform a preamble. She's not a foreplay person when it comes to truth. We know, she said. Dad's shoulders went tight. He put the tape measure down. The garage smelled like dust and cold metal and something else I never identified, maybe the ghost of paint. What do you know? That Alex isn't Mom's, Jess said. That they're yours. Alex's face went through a kaleidoscope of expressions, landing nowhere good. What? They said. Like a person stepping into a pool at night that turns out to be a well. Dad closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked at me like I might save him. I don't know why. I stared back. It was a long time ago, he said, as if that magically changes the scale. I made a mistake. He flicked a glance at Alex, and the word mistake edged the air. Alex took a step back like it smelled bad. A mistake, they said, and their voice was steady in a way that nearly undid me. Dad rushed into it, the way he does when he thinks speed will fix impact. Your mother, your other, Elena. There it was, a name I could spool around. She and I, we... He gestured like he might sculpt a better version of this if his hands could move fast enough. And then when you were born, there were circumstances, she couldn't. He looked at us like for once he needed an assist and none of us would give him one. I couldn't not. He smacked his palm softly against the workbench. I couldn't not bring you home. Jess made a sound with her mouth closed. I said, you lied to us? Because it felt like the smallest truth thing I could carry. We didn't, Dad said, and then repeated smaller. We didn't tell you. He turned to Alex, and I watched his face rearrange into a plea. I wanted to make it right. I wanted to show you were worth. He stopped, looked at the car, and I saw him seeing it the way I'd seen it, ridiculous. I got the car because... He swallowed. Because I wanted to put something good out there. For you. For what we... He ran out of words. Alex put their hand on the roof of the car like it could steady them. They didn't cry. Alex rarely cries. They said clear and even, you should have told me who I am before you told the whole neighborhood what I'm worth. The garage went very quiet. Even the tape measure gave up and stopped ticking closed. We almost made it through brunch. Jess and I tried to triage, small talk like gauze. Mason kept buttering rolls as if mechanical kindness could set the table back to festive. Mom moved like a robot that had been wound too tight and would eventually snap something metal. Alex was absent in the way a person is when they're sitting right there and not inside their body. Dad kept looking at all of us like he wanted to pick the right lock and every key was bent. It broke when Jess put her fork down and said, We're not going to eat quiche over this, right? Her voice was light and furious. We're not going to act like a casserole can traffic cop our feelings? Mom hissed. Jessica. A reflex. Jess ignored her. She turned to Dad. When were you planning to tell us? Dad was holding his coffee like a talisman. When it was the right time, he said, and even he heard it. How stupid that sounded. When it wouldn't hurt. Alex laughed. It cracked at the end. Surprise, they said. It hurts. Mom shifted, a micro flinch I felt in my teeth. It hurt before, she said, and I looked at her like I was seeing a person who'd been standing in my house all my life and I'd only just grown the right eyes. It hurt in ways you didn't notice because you were children, and because I didn't want you to carry my weight. She turned to Alex, and I braced for something cruel or defensive, but what came out was stranger. I have been wrong here, she said. I have loved you smaller than you deserve sometimes. Not because of you. Her mouth trembled. I thought if I kept a room in my heart empty, nothing else would move in uninvited. Alex stared at her like they'd never seen her before. You knew, they said. Not a question. From the beginning, Mom said. Your father. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Jess leaned back in her chair like she wanted distance. Do you love Dad? She asked Mom, plain, like a weather report. Mom looked at the good plates. Yes, she said, as if the word could be graded. Dad put his coffee down. I tried to make it right, he said, and the fact that this was his refrain made it feel like he was trying to convince himself. He turned to Alex again, the way a plant turns toward light. I wanted to make up for what I did. I wanted to. Buy me a car? Alex said. Their voice, again, was steady. Be a better man with money than with truth? Dad flinched. He deserved the line. I thought it, and then I thought about what deserve had been doing in our house all week, and I wanted to throw the word out with the wrapping paper and start over with a language that didn't try to balance anything on an imaginary scale. Mason, sweet and out of his depths, said, Maybe we should. And Jess put a hand on his arm and he went quiet. I looked at my parents and my sibling and felt something unhook in me, some loyalty that had been keeping my insides organized. Do you remember? I said, voice shaking only a little. When my car died on the highway and you told me it would build character to figure it out on my own. And you were right, Dad. It did build character. It built this. Me right now, telling you that you don't get to decide what we know to save yourself discomfort. I didn't plan to say that. It was just there and then it was in the room with us. Mom closed her eyes, then opened them and focused on the centerpiece, as if she could hypnotize her own heart into beating slower. Dad stared at the table. Alex kept their eyes on some middle distance where no one could reach them. It wasn't just about saving myself, Dad said finally. It was about protecting. I thought if I kept this, the origin, from being the main thing, then maybe we could be a family without it being a headline. He looked up, meeting each of our faces. I was wrong. Yeah, Jess said. You were. The cat jumped onto the table in the middle of our debris and knocked over a glass of water. It went everywhere, a little domestic flood, and Mom grabbed a towel like she'd been waiting to fix something. Alex laughed, not happy, not sad, just a sound that acknowledged the absurdity of the universe. We are such a stereotype, they said. This is almost funny if you zoom out. Dad has secret child. Mom raises them. Siblings resent with elegance. Christmas ruins everything. They gestured like a game show model. Alex, Dad said, and put a hand out like you might to pet a horse you've spooked. I love you. I've always loved you. I wanted you here. I know, Alex said, and the words were so unexpected that all of us looked at them. They swallowed. I know you love me. They looked at Mom. I know you tried. I know you sometimes couldn't. They looked at Jess and then at me. I know you both lived in a house where something was always vibrating like a wire behind a wall and you couldn't turn it off, and you didn't know why, and you made jokes about pie and crumbs and thought you were the only ones who noticed the plate was lopsided. The room breathed. We were, for a second, a single organism. And then it broke again, because that's what happens when you open the door. Jess said, What now? Because she needs a plan. I said, I don't know. Because I'm the one who tells reliable truths. Mom said. We eat. Because she's a person who solves problems with plates. Dad said. We can't. And then didn't finish, because he finally understood that this wasn't a thing to be managed. We didn't eat. Or we did, and none of us tasted it. Jess took a plate to the sink and banged it too hard and a crack spidered from the edge. Mom stood very still and then, deliberately, pushed the whole plate into the trash. The sound it made was satisfying in a way I don't want to unpack. Later, after the yelling and the crying and the quiet, Dad left for a walk that pretended to be that, and was really an escape. Mom went upstairs and lay on her bed like a person who's fallen out of a boat and can't decide whether to swim or sink. Jess went to her car and sat there for 40 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. Mason, sweet idiot, texted me from across the room. Do you want tea? And I texted, no, and then he made it anyway and put it next to my hand. Alex and I went outside. The driveway was a memory of tire tracks. The bough from the car had blown against the bushes and hung there strangled. Alex put their hands in their pockets and looked at the sky. I always wondered why I look like Dad, they said. I mean, it's not like that's unheard of, but in this house it was always a joke, you know? Like, haha, the strong genes. They sketched quotes in the air with their fingers. I'm sorry, I said inadequately, about everything and nothing. They looked at me, really looked. You don't have to be the glue, they said. You're allowed to break. I nodded, and because they'd given me permission, I did. It wasn't loud. It was just water leaving a place it had been trying very hard to stay. A week later, I was back in my apartment, the donut shop below me, doing that morning thing where it smells like sugar and dough and a new day. The poinsettia I bought on sale looked out of season and sulked. My phone had a group chat with 47 unread messages, most of them from family threads like little tourniquets I didn't know how to put on. I kept looking at my front door like someone might open it and say, by the way, we decided to revise your origin story. Hope that's okay. In the days after the reveal, we did what people do. We made plans we didn't keep. Dad sent an email, with the subject, context, as if a subject line could turn a confession into an essay. He wrote about Elena, about a night that turned into a year, about a baby he couldn't ignore. He wrote about how he told Mom and how she said, bring the child here. And how he believed that meant absolution when it only meant work and a different shape of love. He wrote about decisions made at kitchen tables and in hospital hallways and in cars parked in grocery store lots when the conversation had to be private because people were watching. Mom called me and didn't say, hi. She said, do you need anything? Which is her way of saying, I need you to tell me I did okay. I said, I don't know. Which is my way of saying, I can't help you yet. Jess texted me late one night, a picture of the ornament she'd bought this year, the little whisk, and the caption, do you think the whisk knew? I sent back a photo of my chipped star and wrote, it always did. We didn't mean it. Or we did a little. Alex sent a message to just the three of us. I'm taking a break from the family chat. They wrote, I'm okay-ish. Not mad at any of you. Then, separately to me, you were always nicer than you had to be. That's not a personality, you know. You don't have to earn your place. I sat with that for a long time. It felt like getting a present that wasn't a car and was somehow heavier. I went to the grocery store and bought flour I didn't need, because I couldn't stop thinking about the pantry and the way Mom's hands shook. I bought oranges, because Alex always smells like them. I bought a candle with a woodsy label because apparently I am predictable. I went home, sat on my floor with my back against my couch, and lit the candle, and waited for the room to smell like I thought it should. Here's what I keep coming back to. The big gift wasn't the car. It wasn't even the truth, not by itself. It was the permission, horribly given, violently delivered, for all of us to drop the script. To say, out loud, that the pie had never been sliced evenly and that we'd been eating around it, making do with crumbs or licking forks and calling it dinner. To admit that Mom's love had a sharp edge and that Dad's love had a blind spot big enough to drive a hatchback through. To stop pretending Alex floated above all of it like a balloon we were all tugging at and acknowledged they were tethered to the same messed up ground. I'm not going to pretend we tied everything up with a new bow and called it growth. The next time I saw my parents, yesterday, actually, we talked about weather and work and a TV show we all pretend to like. The wound is there, not bandaged so much as acknowledged. Dad hugged me longer than usual and smelled like the garage. Mom handed me leftovers and said, "It's too much food for just us," which was the closest she's come to saying, "The house is too big for this emptiness." Jess and I have a plan to meet for lunch without inviting anyone else, which feels radical. Alex is sending me Yelp reviews of driving schools because they've realized they hate highways and want an instructor who isn't Dad. Everybody is doing something that looks like a next step. On Christmas morning, when Dad held out those keys, I felt like a child again in the worst possible way, small, overlooked, mad at myself for caring. Now, the part of me that is not a child can see the thing my father was holding out wasn't keys at all. It was years. It was guilt in a leather fob. It was proof that love, when it's covering something, gets inflated and shiny and then pops. I don't know what we look like as a family in a year. I don't know if Alex will keep the car or sell it and buy something with fewer strings. I don't know if Mom will ever move the baby pictures she doesn't have onto the mantel by putting up a framed piece of paper that says, "We tried." I don't know if Dad will learn to say, "I'm sorry," without adding, "But." I do know that the house will be colder next Christmas, not because the thermostat's lower, but because drafts find places you didn't know were there when you take the paintings off the wall. When I think about that big red bow, I don't think about commercials anymore, about staged happiness and snow that isn't melting. I think about how we covered a seam for years and called the wall whole. I think about how the ribbon hid it, how we lived with the pretending and got good at it. I think about the moment we pulled the ribbon off and the paper tore and the box underneath wasn't a box. It was our life, finally visible, with all its ugly tape and well-meaning corners and the neat printed label that never matched what was inside. Sometimes the biggest holiday gift isn't joy. It's the truth you never asked for, handed to you with hands that shake, wrapped in a bow that keeps slipping off, landing in a pile of cinnamon-scented mornings and cracked plates, and the sound of a flag clicking against metal in the wind. We opened it. We didn't put it back. And now somehow we begin.